of death? What of the curse?
I've always had a soft spot for Indiana Jones. Such classics and often regarded as one of the greatest film trilogies of all time, and even inspired games such as Tomb Raider and Uncharted. But while Indiana Jones has translated decently well to video games in the past, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle just released, or is about to release depending on whether or not you get the early access version, or maybe it has depending on when you watch this. And I gotta say, it's everything I ever wanted out of an Indiana Jones game. Let's talk about it. Hi guys, DPX here reviewing today Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. And before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell and leave a comment, or I will trap you.
You are welcome to proceed.
Take the gun!
Starting off with the good, I gotta talk about the gameplay, as there's combat, stealth, puzzles, and just traversing areas, and I thought that for the most part, they were a lot of fun. Indiana Jones himself controls exactly how you would expect him to. In fact, I'll even get it out of the way and say that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle really makes you feel like Indiana Jones. Got that out of the way. Alright, but cracking your whip, whether it be in combat or to solve puzzles, i.e. using it as a rope to swing from one side to another, just feels nice and satisfying. In fact, in combat, one thing it does that I really like, and I know this is small, but at the same time, it's not that small, but you're fighting an enemy who is holding a weapon. You whip their hand, and then they drop the weapon, and then you can use their weapon. It's a small little detail that does actually affect the gameplay, but either way, I really liked it. Additionally, just playing the game as well, just not in combat, not solving puzzles, just going from point A to point B, just controlling your character feels really good. The combat is great too. I don't think it's this game's biggest strength, and I honestly try to avoid combat as much as possible, but when in a fight, for the most part, the combat feels really solid. When I say I avoided combat as much as possible, that's not because I didn't like the combat, it's because I found the stealth way more rewarding. Yeah, although the game certainly takes inspiration from Uncharted and Tomb Raider, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle has a lot of elements from games like Dishonored and Machine Games' very own Wolfenstein. I'll get into the Wolfenstein inspirations in a minute, but the Great Circle has stealth mechanics similar to Dishonored, and it feels very rewarding. I've heard complaints about the AI and how they just don't notice you, but I didn't really have that issue. Maybe sometimes, but it wasn't enough. And that's why being able to successfully do a stealth takedown is all the more satisfying. You can also do things like pick up other items, like how I mentioned for a second earlier, but you can do that to help with the stealth takedowns. These items can range from a gun to a lead pipe to a giant hairbrush or whatever the fuck, but whatever you use, it feels good taking down a bad guy, because they're Nazis, so of course that feels good. And I mentioned that you can grab guns and use those as weapons, and you can either use them as a physical weapon where you beat someone with it, or as an actual gun. And when you use it as an actual gun, that's when the game feels a bit more like Wolfenstein, which makes sense because, again, this is Machine Games. I guess now is where I address the elephant in the room, that being the fact that this game is in first person. When I first learned that Indy was gonna be in first person, I don't know if I learned that when the game was revealed or if I heard that earlier, but regardless, I wasn't mad, but I was a little confused. But leading up to release, the idea grew on me more and more, and in practice, being in first person sets itself apart from other games. I hate to keep bringing them up, but let's be real. If Indiana Jones was in third person, it would be compared way more to Uncharted and Tomb Raider, or even the other Indiana Jones games, which it's still gonna get compared to either way because it's an Indiana Jones game, but still. Being in first person sets itself apart from all those other games and helps it stand out. Then there are also the puzzles. I don't have a whole lot to say about the puzzles, but I enjoyed them. To move on from the gameplay, I gotta talk about the story. I won't go into spoilers, but Indiana Jones and the Great Circle takes place after Raiders of the Lost Ark, and of course, follows Indiana Jones as he tries to stop many groups of Nazis who are seeking the power of the Great Circle. Hence the name. There are also a lot of characters that show up, like some characters from the movies that show up in this game throughout the story, but there's a few characters in particular who I liked. First, there's Gina, who is Indy's partner during this game, and she didn't feel forced at all and had a very good arc. Then there's this other character named Locust, played by the late great Tony Todd. He's a character that you fight a few times, and I kinda hated that part because I'll get into the boss fights later. But he also had an arc that I really liked. And then the villain, Emmerich Voss, who's the perfect foil for Indiana Jones. I also gotta give a huge shout out to the performances, particularly Troy Baker as our titular character. It's too bad this game missed the cutoff for the Game Awards, because I'd say to just give Troy Baker best performance. Sure, he doesn't have that many like emotional or like really powerful moments. That's just not the type of performance he gives, and that's just not the type of character he's playing. But if I didn't know any better, and you told me Harrison Ford was playing Indy in this game, I would believe you, which should say a lot. The music is great too. Like, they got the perfect score for this game. Obviously, you hear the iconic Indiana Jones theme throughout the game, but there's other music that is just perfect in this game. And visually, I am shocked by how good this game looks. There are some graphical glitches that momentarily affect the visuals, but overall, this game looks amazing. And lastly, right off the bat, once you start the game, it's clear that Machine Games just gets it. They just understand what makes Indiana Jones great. The game starts off with a recreation of the opening scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it serves almost like as a tutorial, and you got a lot of other elements from the movies, like falling through traps, or like snarky one-liners, and even like when you get beaten down during combat, you can crawl around and pick up your hat, which serves almost like a second life, and a cutscene plays, and it's just really cool. All this, I feel, makes Indiana Jones and the Great Circle the definitive Indiana Jones game. Moving on to the things I'm mixed on, the UI is very good for the most part, but when you open up your map, it's not good. Having to switch between maps, books, journals, what have you, is just a little jumbled and not fun to do, you know? And you don't exit the map by pressing B, you do it by pressing the, I don't know what the button's called, but it's like the opposite of the pause button. It's not that big of a deal, but it did get annoying after a little while. And the other thing I'm mixed on, and I mentioned it briefly, is the boss fights. They were few and far between, and not a major part of the game, believe it or not. Like, there were not that many boss fights in this game, and not all of them were bad, but each boss would just take a little too long to beat, and not because they're hard or anything, because they would just not die. Like I said earlier, I like the combat, but it's not the strongest part, and I felt that tenfold when fighting the bosses. Moving on to the bad, there are some issues that don't kill the game for me, but they are issues. First off, a small issue is that you can't manually save your game. This isn't that big of an issue because the game autosaves like a lot, but it would have been nice to be able to manually save the game if you have to like put it down in the middle of something to go do something else, and not just hoping your Xbox doesn't close the game for some reason, because I don't know about you, but my Xbox does that a lot. Another issue I have is, I mentioned that you have a whip, but Indy also has a pistol, and it kind of sucks ass. It's pretty clunky, you lose ammo rather quickly, and using it as a weapon could be cool, but it breaks, and repairing it is also very clunky too. Not a big deal, but it is worth mentioning. And lastly, while the game is very polished for the most part, there are some visual glitches that like pop up every now and then, and that kind of takes me out, and it's kind of just like, oh, that's weird, why is it doing that, you know? Like some texture glitches, some clipping, you know? Not terrible, but noticeable.
You have no history, no nation, no leader. What you have is your stupid American cartoons. Choo choo, choo choo, ha 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 ha. You laugh and dance, celebrating your own idiocy and drinking the piss you call beer.
I mentioned some issues, sure, but really, they do not detract from the overall experience that Indiana Jones and the Great Circle provides. The game manages to take what makes Indiana Jones great, whether it be adventuring, the combat, the performances, the music, and translates it perfectly to video games. It's a hell of an adventure, and definitely one of my favorite games of the year. Overall, I'm going to give Indiana Jones and the Great Circle a 9 out of 10. The last big game release of the year, there might be like one more game I'm looking at playing, but this is like the last major game release of the year. And I gotta say, a great one. But what do you guys think? Have you guys played this game? Do you guys plan on playing it? And if you guys haven't, do you guys want to play it, not want to play it? Anything about the game, let me know down below. Anyways, be sure to comment, subscribe, or I will trap you.